There comes a moment in every life, though we dare not speak of it often, when everything we trusted crumbles. The plans we made, the identity we clung to, the meaning we thought secure, all turn to ash in our hands. We do not know whether we are being punished or simply forgotten. There is a silence in the heavens that echoes louder than thunder. It is in this moment that we are most tempted to believe the story is over, but it is not. Despair, though it feels final, is not the end. It is a doorway, and like all doors, it leads somewhere, if only we have the courage, or perhaps merely the desperation, to walk through it. It is a strange habit of heaven that it chooses the ash heap as the starting place of renewal. One would expect a divine story to begin in palaces, or at least on solid ground, but again and again, the author prefers the broken, the undone, the barren. Think of the valley of dry bones, where not even a whisper of life remained, yet breath came. Think of the ruined temple, destined to be rebuilt with greater glory. And of course, think of the tomb, a place no one leaves, becoming the womb of resurrection. There is a kind of divine irony at work in all this, but it is not cruelty, it is clarity. God is not interested in touching up our lives with a bit of polish and shine. He wants to remake us, and remaking often begins with breaking. If you find yourself in ashes, you are not alone, but more importantly, you are not finished. The ashes, painful though they are, serve a purpose. They strip away illusion. They show us how flimsy our towers were. They reveal the foundations we had trusted in were not foundations at all, but mist. And once everything unnecessary is gone, what remains is what can truly be built upon. This is not a message of ease, nor is it a platitude dressed up in spiritual guise. It is instead the deep and often difficult truth that what is worst in your life may yet become the beginning of what is best. Hope, then, is not a passive thing. It is not the vague optimism that things might eventually improve. No, real hope is defiant. It stares into the ruins and declares this is not how the story ends. It is the stubborn refusal to let the last word be sorrow. And it does not arise from within us, as though we could manufacture light in a void. Hope, like rain, comes from above. It is given, but we must receive it, and receiving requires surrender, not to despair, but to the one who brings beauty from ashes. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. Even now, God is whispering into the dust, calling forth something new. What that new thing will be, you may not yet see. You may still smell the smoke, but rest assured, He does not leave things in ruin. What He begins, He finishes, and He always begins in the most unlikely places: a manger, a cross, a shattered life. From ashes, hope. From hope, new beginnings, and from new beginnings, the kind of life that cannot be shaken, not because it is free from pain, but because it was born through it. So take heart, the fire has passed, the ashes are here, and with them a promise. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion, until the day it is no longer a whisper in the dark, but a song in the full light of morning. There are times in life when everything collapses. Not suddenly like a thunderclap, but slowly, like a house eaten away by termites, until one day it simply falls. We are left standing among the ashes, blinking in the light of a world that no longer makes sense. It is easy to believe that this is the end. The loss feels too deep, the failure too great, the silence from heaven too heavy. We mistake the stillness for abandon. We tell ourselves that if God were truly here, He would have stepped in sooner. We imagine Him absent because we cannot feel Him near. But what if the silence is not absence, but preparation? What if the ashes are not a grave, but a garden waiting to bloom? It is one of the great paradoxes of the divine way that death always seems to precede life. We see it in nature, when a seed must fall and be buried before it can grow. We see it in history, when empires crumble just before truth is born among shepherds. And we see it most clearly in the cross, a moment that looked like the end of everything, but turned out to be the beginning of everything that matters. The lesson is not lost on those willing to look closely. God does not save us from suffering. He transforms us through it. He does not always snatch us from the fire, but He walks with us in it. And more often than not, He does His best work not on the mountaintop, but in the valley where nothing seems to grow. When you are in the ashes, you may feel useless, discarded, too broken to be of any value, but that is not how God sees you. To Him, you are not a ruin to be mourned. You are the starting point of a new creation. Your scars are not signs of failure. They are places where light can enter. The world will tell you to move on, to rebuild, to be strong, but God calls you to something deeper. He calls you to be remade. That is why He often begins again, not with strength, but with surrender. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not with a grand display, but with a flicker of light in the dark. Hope, in its truest form, is not naive. It is not a denial of pain or a dismissal of reality. It does not ignore the ashes. Rather, it stands in the midst of them and says, even now, something more is possible. Real hope is not the easy answer, but the hard road. It is choosing to believe that God is not finished, even when everything in you feels finished. It is holding on to the promise that what has been lost is not beyond the reach of redemption. This is not sentiment. It is not wishful thinking. It is the hard-won conviction of those who have seen God bring beauty from disaster time and time again. If you feel broken beyond repair, take heart. God specializes in restoration, not patchwork, but renewal, not a return to what was, but the creation of what could never have been without the breaking. He is not in the business of resuscitating old dreams. He is in the business of giving birth to new ones, and that work begins precisely where you think it cannot, in the ashes of your former life. So do not despise the ashes, do not rush past them, kneel in them if you must, but lift your eyes, for the one who brings rivers through deserts and calls life out of tombs is already at work. And if you listen, not with your ears, but with your heart, you may hear Him say what He has said since the beginning. Behold, I am making all things new. There is something both terrifying and holy about reaching the end of yourself, when all the scaffolding of your life, your plans, your ambitions, your sense of who you are, comes crashing down. It feels like death. In many ways it is. But death in the hands of God is never the end. It is a turning point, a divine pause before something greater begins. When everything is reduced to ashes, when nothing remains to prop you up or disguise your frailty, God speaks not with condemnation, but with invitation. He does not say, "You're finished." He says, "Let's begin." What we call failure, God often calls foundation. But it is not the sort of foundation the world esteems. It is not strength or certainty or success. It is the honest emptiness of one who can no longer pretend to be self-sufficient. It is the silence after the collapse, the humility of having nothing left but a quiet prayer. And it is there, in that raw and trembling place, that God moves most powerfully. He does not shout from the sky, He whispers from within. He does not sweep in to erase the past, but steps gently into it, redeeming every broken moment, every choice we wish we could undo. In this way, the ashes are not punishment, they are preparation. God's new beginnings are not hurried affairs. They do not come with dramatic music or flashing lights. They arrive like morning light after a long night, soft, steady, sure. You may not even notice at first. You might still be sifting through the dust, mourning what you've lost, unaware that something sacred is already sprouting beneath your feet. For this is the way of grace. It comes when we least expect it, and often in forms we do not recognize. A phone call, a kind word, a flicker of courage, a thought that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end. These are the early signs of resurrection, not loud, but real. To embrace a new beginning means surrendering the version of your life you thought you had to have. This is no small thing. It means letting go not just of what broke, but of your need to understand why it broke. It means trusting that the one who allowed the fire also holds the plan for what comes after it. And make no mistake, there is something after it. The fire may consume the old, but it cannot touch what is eternal. It cannot reach the promises God has made over your life. It cannot undo the future He is still preparing. In this new work God is doing, you are not a passive observer. You are not a victim of fate or a spectator to your own story. You are invited to step forward. Not all at once, not with perfect faith, but with the next small yes. That yes might look like praying again, or reaching out again, or simply getting out of bed when everything in you says stay down. These steps seem small, but they are seeds, and in the kingdom of God, even the smallest seed becomes a tree. There is no life too far gone, no soul too scarred, no past too heavy for the hands of the one who makes all things new. If you find yourself in the ashes, remember this: the God who shaped man from dust has not forgotten how to breathe life into what seems lifeless. What feels like an end is often the threshold of a beginning that could not have come any other way. Let the ashes remind you, not of what you've lost, but of what God is about to build. There are seasons in life when the ground beneath us gives way. What we once counted as secure, relationships, dreams, health, even faith, falls apart, and we are left standing in the smoke, surrounded by what looks like the wreckage of all we had hoped for. In such moments, we do not ask deep theological questions. We ask simple ones. Where is God? Does He see me? Is there anything left worth hoping for? The silence that follows those questions can feel unbearable. But it is often in that silence, not in thunder or earthquake, that God speaks. Not to condemn, not to explain, but to begin something new. You see, in the kingdom of heaven, ashes are not wasted. What we call endings, God often calls beginnings. It is not that He delights in our pain, but that He refuses to let it be meaningless. The fire may have burned away what we once held dear, but perhaps it was also burning away what could never bear the weight of eternity. We are taught to cling to comfort, to avoid pain, to build lives so secure that nothing can shake them. But if our lives are built on anything less than the love of God, the shaking is mercy, because only what is eternal can truly last. The ashes, then, are not just what remains of loss. They are what remains of falsehood, burned away so that truth might grow. Still, it is hard to hope in the ashes. Hope is a quiet, almost defiant thing. It does not shout, it whispers, and sometimes the whisper is almost drowned out by grief. Yet hope does not need to be loud to be real. It only needs to be true. And it is true that God has not abandoned you. It is true that He is not finished. If you feel like your life has been reduced to rubble, remember this: The God who raised Jesus from the grave does his best work in places where no one else sees possible. The tomb became a womb of new life, and your ashes can too. Not in an instant, and not without pain, but with purpose. Always with purpose. This new beginning God offers is not about restoring things to how they were. He is not interested in rewinding time or reassembling old idols. No, he is creating something altogether different, something deeper, richer, truer. But to receive this new thing, you must be willing to release the old. That is the hard part. We want resurrection without death, joy without mourning, newness without surrender, but God's way is honest. He does not ask us to pretend nothing happened. He invites us to bring every shattered piece into his hands, not to be discarded, but to be redeemed. He does not erase our stories, he re-authors them. And in this new story, you are not a minor character, you are central. You are the one God is calling forward, not because you are strong, but because he is. Your scars are not shameful in his sight, they are sacred. They speak not of defeat, but of survival, of grace that carried you when you could not carry yourself, and those scars, once surrendered, can become signposts for others, proof that even in the darkest night, light still breaks through. So do not despise the ashes. Do not believe they are the final word. The God who brings water from rock and life from death is not finished with you. What looks like the end is often the place he begins again, not with noise, but with a whisper, not with perfection, but with willingness. Lift your eyes, hope is near, and he is not done writing your story. There are moments in every life when everything falls apart. Not in the way fiction often dramatizes with a single tragic event, but in a quieter, more exhausted unraveling. A dream slips away, a relationship dissolves, the faith that once felt solid becomes thin and unsure. We look at the fragments of what once was and wonder if anything can be built from what remains. In those moments, the heart doesn't need clever answers. It needs hope, and the strange, almost scandalous truth is this: God often begins his most beautiful work in the ruins. Ashes tell a story. They are what's left when the fire has done its worst. But in God's world, ashes are not proof of failure. They are the raw material for new life. We may think God does his best work in temples and triumphs, but history and scripture tell another tale. Over and over, we see him bending low to meet people not at their strongest, but at their weakest, when they are face down in the dirt, clutching nothing but sorrow. It is there, in the lowest places, that he speaks the words that change everything. But this new thing rarely begins with a grand gesture. It begins in silence, in waiting, in the ache of what is no longer. And perhaps that is why we often miss it. We expect God to shout, but he often whispers. We expect a miraculous rescue, but he offers a slow redemption. The fire doesn't always end with immediate clarity or restoration. Sometimes it leaves us with questions that may never be answered this side of eternity. But what matters more than the answers is this: God is still with us in the aftermath. He has not left. The absence we fear is often the space he is using to make room for what's next. And what's next is not a return to what was. It is not the reconstruction of a past that no longer fits. It is the forging of something entirely new, something that could not have existed without the breaking. That's the hard truth we often resist. Some things must die for new things to live. Some dreams must collapse for better ones to rise. Some illusions must be burned away so truth can be seen clearly. God is not interested in superficial healing. He wants transformation. not a touch-up, but a total recreation from the inside out. In this process, we are not called to be heroes, we are called to be honest. God does not wait for us to be perfect before He begins again. He starts with our surrender. He works not through our strength, but through our openness, our willingness to say, I don't have much, but here I am. That is where new beginnings are born, not in certainty, but in trust. And in time we begin to see signs of life, a moment of peace, a rekindled desire to pray, a quiet joy that returns without explanation. These are the first green shoots breaking through the ash. You are not forgotten in your ashes. You are not beyond hope. The fire that touched your life has not destroyed your story, it has refined it. And if you let Him, God will use even this, especially this, to draw you into a deeper kind of life, one not built on circumstances, but on Him. The pain you've walked through is not wasted, it is seed, and what grows from it will not just be for you, but for others as well. Your healing, your redemption, your new beginning will become a light for someone else standing in their own ashes. So lift your eyes. The story is not over. The author is still writing, and with him, every end is just the start of a better chapter.